2023 AHEAD Program Webinar. Here is the agenda for today. We will first give an introduction of the Federal Home Loan Bank of San Francisco. Next, we will give a summary of the AHEAD program. We will then cover the application process and walk through the application and budget in a case study. Then we will pause to answer questions relating to application. Afterwards, we will talk about disbursement and compliance. And we'll wrap up with a final Q&A session. The Federal Home Loan Bank system was chartered by Congress in 1932 during the Great Depression as a funding resource for home mortgage lenders. Today, lending institutions use federal home loan banks to finance housing and economic development in their local communities. There are 11 federal home loan banks nationwide, and each operates as a private cooperative financial institution. We are a government-sponsored enterprise and are regulated by the Federal Housing Finance Agency, or FHFA, which is the same regulator as Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. As previously mentioned, federal home loan banks are cooperatives, and the Federal Home Loan Bank of San Francisco is owned by our member institutions headquartered in our district of Arizona, California, and Nevada. Our members include commercial banks, saving institutions, credit unions, insurance companies, and non-depository community development financial institutions, or CDFIs. The mission of our bank is to provide our members with reliable access to low-cost liquidity, essential financial services and expertise, and resources for affordable housing and economic development. Most people in the community development space know the bank because of our Affordable Housing Program, or AHP, which I'll talk more about in just a second. We are required by our regulator, the FHFA, to use 10% of our annual net income for AHP. The bank has a public service mission and offers a range of products and services to benefit its members and the communities they serve. The figure you see demonstrates all the products and services we provide to our members to support their community and economic development needs. In the interest of time, I will just point out a few of these, and we've included our contact information at the end of the presentation if anyone would like to learn more. First up is AHEAD, which is an economic development grant program that provides funding that benefits low to moderate income communities. The AHEAD program is funded annually at the discretion of the Federal Home Loan Bank of San Francisco's Board of Directors. We will discuss AHEAD in much more detail shortly. Next, I'll briefly mention our affordable housing programs. First is our AHP General Fund. These are project-based grants for multifamily and owner-occupied affordable housing development projects in our district. We also have a AHP Nevada Targeted Fund, which specifically funds affordable housing projects in the state of Nevada. Our bank also has a AHP Set-Aside Program, also known as WISH, which are grants for down payment and closing cost assistance to low to moderate income first-time home buyers. Additionally, our bank offers a new program called Middle Income Down Payment Assistance Program, or MDPA, which are grants for first-time home buyer with income in the range of 80.01 to 140% AMI, or area median income. I will now give an overview of the AHEAD program. AHEAD stands for Access to Housing and Economic Assistance for Development. AHEAD grants provide funding for targeted economic development projects that benefit low to moderate income communities. AHEAD is flexible and can be used for a variety of different purposes, including expanding proven development models or piloting new interventions. Since program inception in 2004, AHEAD has been funded annually and has awarded over $20 million to more than 700 projects. The bank's board of directors approved $4 million in funding for 2023, which is up from $1.5 million in 2022. Grant requests per project can be up to $100,000, which is up from $50,000 in previous years. Note that we may not fund at the full $100,000 level. In past years, when the maximum requested grant amount was $50,000, the average grant was $27,000. And we typically don't fund less than $20,000 unless specifically requested on application. The AHEAD program is highly competitive. In 2022, we received 180 eligible applications, requesting nearly $8 million. And ultimately, we were able to fund 55 projects, or about 30% of all applications. Even with a larger budget, we expect this year to be just as competitive. Now I will talk about the program eligibility requirements. The project sponsor must be a nonprofit, local government, or tribal association. Projects must be located in Arizona, California, or Nevada. Grants funds must be used within 18 months of award date. Funds will be available for awarded projects starting in September 2023 and must be used in full by March 2025. We've heard some confusion on the two parties within the application materials. So to offer some clarity, sponsor or project sponsor refers to the nonprofit organization, local government agency, or tribal association that will ultimately use the AHEAD grant funds for their project. The sponsor proposes and administers the project. A sponsor must partner with a member. Member refers to the financial institution that is a member of the Federal Home Loan Bank of San Francisco. These could be banks, credit unions, CDFIs, and etc. The member is the organization that supports the application and disperses the grant award from the Federal Home Loan Bank of San Francisco to the sponsor. All applications must be submitted by a bank member. Both the sponsor and the member are responsible for the project's completion and final grant reporting. If a sponsor does not have a member yet selected for their application, they can find one from the member directory on our website, which is linked here on the slide. There are 8 different AHEAD project types, and sponsors will self-select the best fit based on their project objectives and activities. I will provide a brief definition for each project type, along with an example of what we have funded in the past. Capacity building refers to projects that increase the internal staff and/or operating capacity of sponsors. In the past, we have supported projects that help an organization hire its first paid executive director, and other projects that provide staff with expert training so that they can offer better service delivery to its clients. Entrepreneurial microenterprise is a project type that supports entrepreneurs, microenterprises, and small businesses. For example, AHEAD has supported projects that offer business planning for local minority and women entrepreneurs, or help with access to capital for micro and small businesses. In the project featured on this slide, El Pajaro Community Development Corporation, in partnership with Santa Cruz Community Credit Union, provided bilingual and culturally appropriate small and micro business education to support emerging entrepreneurs in the food, farming, and childcare industries. Financial education are projects that provide financial capabilities and education to individuals and to communities. Examples include financial education workshops for immigrant communities or credit building programs for families preparing to buy a house. Housing initiative are projects that can support housing in a variety of ways, as long as the projects doesn't directly fund affordable housing constructions and or down payment and closing cost assistance. AHEAD is not allowed to be used for AHP eligible housing projects or AHP eligible down payment assistance. For example, AHEAD couldn't be used to build affordable housing, but it could be used to fund a job training program at an affordable housing project. Please contact us if you have any questions about AHP eligibility. We've supported research studies for the feasibility of alternative housing types, such as tiny homes and ADUs, as well as funded cases managers to help families at risk of homelessness. Job training refers to project that will lead to job creation or preservation, workforce development, and or other job opportunities for clients. Some examples include construction training for formerly incarcerated people and workforce development opportunities for transition-aged youth. Other economic development is for projects that don't fit into one of the other project type categories or exhibit characteristics that fit into multiple categories. An example would include an urban farm providing jobs, healthy foods, and environmental stewardship to local residents. Another example would be a local church providing economic development and public health services to their community. Social services refers to projects that provide social services to clients and the community, with an economic development component included in the services. We have supported projects that provide life skills and professional development for domestic violence survivors and funding to support homelessness prevention programs. I want to emphasize that economic development was a component of the social services projects. Technical assistance. These are projects that provide direct technical assistance to clients and external parties. An example would be a nonprofit providing BIPOC and minority-owned businesses access to loan products and direct technical assistance to rural farmers to formalize their businesses. The AHEAD grant is flexible and can be used for a variety of purposes. The grant funds can be used in a lot of different ways, including paying for staff and consultants, training and program materials, research and market studies, and etc. Here is a list of representative examples of eligible project uses of funds. This list is not exhaustive, nor is it exclusive. Project users of funds are usually deemed eligible as long as they are for an economic development project and the uses are clearly outlined in the application budget. Now let's review the 2023 program timeline at a high level. We will get into the application details in a moment. AHEAD has a one-time annual application period, which opened May 2nd. We have an application document submission process, which requires members to upload documents to the bank via a secure portal. The bank has to set up the secure portal for each application, so we are asking that members provide a setup request form no later than May 25th. The application window will remain open until the round closes on Thursday, June 1st. After the application round closes, we will then undergo a review period during the summer and announce the winners in early September. Ahead grant award winners will have until the end of December to request funds, but we encourage all requests to be sent to the bank no later than November to ensure enough time for disbursement. Members will have 30 days to disburse the funds to the sponsor. The sponsor should have access to the funds by the end of 2023, but could access the funds earlier if they work with the member to submit the disbursement request shortly after the September award announcement. The sponsor will have the 18-month grant period to implement their project, spend the funds in full, and submit compliance documents by end of March 2025. Now I will hand it over to Noel to talk more about the application process.
Thanks, Cindy. Let's review the AHEAD application process together, and we'll take a look at a case study on how to complete the AHEAD application and budget. Cindy just walked us through this timeline, which will serve as a roadmap for the remainder of the presentation. Let's dive into the application process in more detail. As a reminder, only members can submit applications. Interested sponsors or nonprofits will need to partner with a member in order to submit an AHEAD application. There are 3 parts to the application package, which must contain the following: the application and budget, which are integrated into one Excel document. The second piece is the project sponsor's IRS nonprofit status letter. For local government agencies or tribal associations, we would like to see founding documents or other documentation establishing the organization. The third piece is a management roster and board of directors roster for the project sponsor. Both rosters must be included and uploaded as a single document. If the project sponsor doesn't have a board of directors, then they should include a statement with the management roster stating this fact. Please make sure there is no PII or personal identifying information on these documents. Sometimes we see retired board member home addresses, and that information needs to be redacted or removed altogether from this document. Please note that if any of these documents are missing from the application package, or if they include PII, the application will be deemed ineligible. You can find the application on our website, and to help with the application process, we put together an AHEAD application reference guide, which has detailed instructions on completing and submitting the application. We won't review the guide during this webinar, but it is available on the AHEAD resources page next to the application, and it's also linked here for your reference. All right, so let's take a closer look at the actual application.
We call the integrated application and budget the E-form, which is an Excel format. The E-form should be filled out by the project sponsor, but the members should also review it. Before getting into the application itself, we wanted to offer a few tips for navigating and understanding the application. The E-form has 2 tabs, an application tab and an application budget tab. There are a few important pieces of information to review at the top. The application deadline details and contact information is included here if there are any questions. We highly encourage members and sponsors to look at our website and to review the application reference guide, as they may answer your question. But the bank is available for any further questions. At the very top, there is a progress bar that shows how much of the application has been complete. As you can see here, the application is currently at 93%. As we move through the application, we will eventually get to 100% complete. which is the point where a sponsor should then submit to the member for review and upload. If an application isn't complete, the progress bar will not show 100%, and any application that we receive that is not 100% complete will be deemed ineligible. We've also included an application form input field legend at the top, which provides tips on how each field behaves based on the data input into it. An orange exclamation point means the field must be completed and is required. A green check mark means the field has been completed correctly. A red X mark means the field has been filled out incorrectly or has an invalid entry. A grayed out field means the field isn't required. Note that some fields may appear grayed out at first, but as the application is filled out, it may become a required field. We've also included an application table of contents, which serves a few purposes. First, it provides an overview of the different application sections and includes hyperlinks that will move the user directly to that section. For example, if I click Project Summary, it'll take me to that section. To go back to the top, you can click anywhere on the top of the application form. The table of contents also provides progress bars for each section, which work in the same way the overall project bar at the top right works. The table of contents provides an at-a-glance view of which sections need to be completed and/or may have data entry errors. We can see that a few of these sections are complete, some have errors, and some are in progress. The first section is project information. We've instituted a 60-character limit for the project name, so please keep this in mind. We use the project name for marketing purposes, so sponsors should think strategically about the name and how it would sound if they do win an award. This information should be for the location of the project, not the location of the sponsor. Note that state and county fields are drop-downs, so please select the correct fields from those lists. A state must be selected before the county can be selected. In this case, California has been selected as the state, but the county has not been selected, even though it's a required field. We can click County and select Alameda because Oakland is located in Alameda County. And now the field has been filled out correctly. If we want to change the state after a county has been selected, delete the county first before selecting a different state. And both these fields can simply be deleted if a user wants to start over. The member institution section is self-explanatory, but the contact should be the member contact that is responsible for this AHEAD application. This will be the member we contact with any questions and who we will notify if they win an award. The sponsor contact, similar to the member section, should be the contact that is responsible for the AHEAD application and who we can contact if we have any questions or award information to share. Under type of organization, we have three options: nonprofit organization, government agency, or tribal association. Under sponsor description, we ask sponsors to describe the organization's core mission, management structure, and accomplishments. The sponsor should focus on a clear, concise overview of its organization here. This isn't the place to discuss the project, so please keep this section high level. Note that we have character limits in certain parts of the application. In this particular section, we have a 3,000 character limit. If the answer is greater than 3,000 characters, you will receive an error message. In this case study, we have an error message saying that we are 57 characters over, so this is not an acceptable answer. We need to delete part of the data entry. So when we click back out, we can see the message changed. saying we have 26 characters remaining, and there's a green check mark, so the answer is now correct. One trick on writing this section, to create a new paragraph while inside the text field, you can hit Alt-Enter, and then you can click outside to go back to the rest of the application. If you just click Enter by itself, it'll move the cursor to the next field. So if you want to write multiple paragraphs within this one field, you can just hold Alt-Enter. There are a handful of fields in the AHEAD grant section. The first is the grant amount. You'll see that the maximum grant amount requested is $100,000. This is up from $50,000 last year. We also have the project start and end date. Remember that AHEAD is an 18-month grant, so if you win an award, the funds must be fully spent and compliance documentation must be submitted within that time period. We also ask if the sponsor has won an AHEAD award in past years. If this question is answered yes, the grayed out section will turn yellow and allow input. If a sponsor has won multiple awards, we allow up to 5 entries in this section, so put the most recent awards first. If there are questions about past awards, please don't hesitate to contact the bank and we'll provide that information to you. A couple additional notes that I want to add here about previous AHEAD awards. AHEAD isn't intended as an ongoing operating grant program. We want to support a diverse range of new projects and sponsors and geographies. That being said, winning an award in past years does not exclude the sponsor or project from applying in the current year, especially if a past winner is applying to AHEAD for a new project or expansion of a past successful project. The next section is the project summary, where we ask the sponsor to describe the project that will use the AHEAD funds. Please be as concise as possible. We are looking for clarity in this section so that we fully understand the project. We want sponsors to describe how the project or program will work, how it will benefit low to moderate income communities, what goals will the project look to achieve, and what impacts or outcomes are expected if the project does receive an AHEAD grant. This is also the section to clearly outline the economic benefit of receiving AHEAD funds. AHEAD is an economic development grant program, so how the project will lead to outcomes such as job creation and preservation, improved individual and family self-sufficiency, upward economic mobility, etc., will be more positively received. We are also always looking for innovative and unique projects, so please consider that when applying for AHEAD. For project type, the E-form will only allow one answer to be selected. We understand some projects may fit into multiple categories, but please pick the project type that best describes the project. Note that if other economic development is chosen as the project type, the gray box will become yellow, so please briefly describe the type of economic development project in the box provided. Underneath project type are a set of questions that are required for all projects and help us determine program eligibility. The AHEAD program grant funds must benefit low to moderate wage earners, small businesses, the greater community, or low-income households, which is why we ask these questions. The first question asks about job creation or preservation. It isn't required that AHEAD grants create jobs, but this helps us understand the potential impact of the grant request. The next 4 questions will help us determine eligibility for the program, and at least one of these questions must be answered yes. Underneath these questions are 5 sets of questions, but only the fields in yellow are required. All other grayed out boxes do not need to be filled out. This question is unique and tied to the project type selected, so it will change if the project type field is changed. Find the yellow section that corresponds to the project type selected above and fill out the current and future impact according to that project type. For example, this is a job training project, so we ask how many part-time or full-time employees are currently working for organizations supported by the sponsor for this project. And then we ask how many new part-time or full-time employees will work for organizations supported by the sponsor for this project with an AHEAD grant. The idea is to understand how much of an impact the AHEAD grant will have based on the project type selected. The next section asks about targeted beneficiaries. Please check all that apply. Note that if other at-risk populations is selected, the grayed out box will become yellow. So briefly describe what other population is being served by the project if it's not in the list above. The next section asks about targeted service area, which is a drop-down list. Note again, if other is selected, the grayed out box will become yellow, so briefly describe the service area. The bottom of this section asks how the project's results will be measured or evaluated. We want the sponsor to clearly describe how they will measure results or successes for the project. In our experience reviewing applications, quantitative measures are easier to understand and compare to at a later date, but it's ultimately up to the sponsor to clearly outline their measurement and evaluation methods. If awarded an AHEAD grant, we will compare this section to the project status report submitted during compliance to see if the project was successful in achieving expected results. And we'll talk more about this when we discuss compliance a little later in the presentation. In the other FHL Bank San Francisco program section, this is for informational purposes only. Please fill this out to the best of your ability. And if you have questions about awards and other programs offered by the bank, please reach out to us. The next section deals with the project use of funds. As a reminder, the AHEAD funds must be fully used within 18 months of the date of the award. So this section specifically asks whether the sponsor will be able to use the funds within this time frame. If a project wins an AHEAD award, it's really important that the grant funds are fully spent within that 18-month time frame. We then ask the sponsor to briefly describe how AHEAD grant funds will actually be used during this time frame. And this should align with what is presented on the budget. The next section asks about member involvement in the project. This is really going to be based on the relationship and involvement between the member and the sponsor. Please list whether the member is providing any type of financial or non-financial support to the project. On the financial side, this could be grants or loans. Non-financial involvement by the member could be sharing of financial education curriculum, volunteer staff time, or in this case study, a board member. Note that both sections are grayed out to start, but if either is checked, a yellow box will appear that needs to be filled out. The last two sections ask about other funding sources and other organizations involved in the project. Fill out both of these sections to the best of your ability. These sections are for information only to help us evaluate the total scope of the project, so there is no right or wrong answer. Once the application has been completed, you can scroll to the bottom and you will see a link to the application budget. Now that we've reviewed the application, let's look at the AHEAD budget tab. Note there is a link at the top right corner, back to AHEAD application form, that is visible at all times and can be clicked to go back to the application. The AHEAD budget workbook will automatically fill the project name, sponsor name, and budget start and end dates based on the application. Sponsors are responsible for filling out the rest of the fields. The budget includes brief instructions on filling out the two sections of the budget, the sources and the uses. Again, please feel free to look at the AHEAD reference guide if you have any questions as you fill it out. Sponsors should start by filling out the project budget application column in the sources section. These are all the sources of funds for the entire project, including the AHEAD grant. The requested AHEAD grant will automatically pre-fill. If the AHEAD grant is the total project budget, that is totally fine. In this example, the AHEAD grant is already pre-filled and the project is expecting $25,000 in government grants, $60,000 in foundation grants, $17,000 in organization income, and then $10,000 for other fee-for-service income, for a total project budget of $190,000. We have these other line items, which you can use for other line items that don't fit into one of the existing categories. But please be specific if you use this line item and include a line item description. So here in this example, we typed in fee for service. We then ask sponsors to let us know whether these other sources of funds are anticipated or committed. We understand the anticipated column is an estimate, so fill this out to the best of your ability. For example, under government grants, we can see that we've listed $25,000, and $25,000 is anticipated and none is committed at this point in time. This should balance, and the far right column should show 0 if this has been filled out correctly. We're intentionally not filling this out correctly to show the behavior of the form, so we're going to leave this as is for now, but this budget does not balance yet. Moving on to uses, we have some instructions here, which we encourage you read. And this is broken out into 3 sections. Personnel, which tends to be the most common use of AHEAD. Program expenses, which tend to be very specific to the particular project or program. And then general overhead for more shared expenses. As with the sources side, we want to see the total project budget here. We ask that sponsors fill out the project budget application column first. This should be for all expenses expected for the project. This should align with the total sources of funds, and in this example should also be $190,000. Again, we offer other line items in case there are expenses or uses that don't fit into one of these categories. Please make sure to include a line item description if you use the other line item. The AHEAD requested column should align with the total requested AHEAD grant amount. We do ask that sponsors carefully consider AHEAD funding as they're thinking about these different line items, and we recommend AHEAD support as few line items as possible, since we may require backup documentation for all of those line items that AHEAD fully or partially covers. And again, we'll discuss this more a little later on in the presentation. In this example, the sponsor is requesting $78,000 in AHEAD. So $112,000 needs to be allocated to different expenses. We can see they've allocated AHEAD to 4 different line items. We also ask for the other sources. For example, for salaries and wages, the budget is showing $80,000 in expenses. AHEAD will cover $36,000 and other sources will cover $44,000. And the far right column should balance out at 0. Now, we've intentionally not balanced this budget because we want to see the behavior of the e-form when there are errors, and so we can help correct those errors together. But assuming we think we've filled out this budget correctly, we would then navigate back to the application form. And there's a checkbox at the bottom that says the application budget worksheet has been fully completed. This should only be checked after the budget is done. When we check that box, we get a red error message saying the budget does not balance and we need to go back to the budget and correct any errors. When we go back to the budget, all errors will be highlighted in red so that we can easily fix the budget. Errors are typically one of the following. The must be zero column on the right should always be 0, and the excess deficiency row at the very bottom should also always be 0. On the sources side, we can see that foundation grants has not been properly allocated between committed and anticipated sources. We've identified $60,000 in foundation grants, but only have $45,000 under anticipated. So we have a $15,000 imbalance. If we enter $15,000 in this section and click enter, the error message goes away and this part of the budget balances. Let's review the bottom part to see if there's an error message down here. And we can see that there are no more error messages. So this budget is complete. When we navigate back to the application, we can see a green check mark has appeared and we can now finish the application. When we go back to the top of the application and try to figure out why we're not at 100% complete, we can look at the table of contents and see that all sections are complete except project summary. If we click on project summary and scroll down, we can see that we missed filling out the project impact question. So in this example, we're going to say that 10 part-time employees are currently going through the job training program, and 15 will go through the project with an AHEAD grant. Now this is an acceptable answer. We can see the green check marks, and when we click back to the top of the application, we can see that we've reached 100%. The application is now complete and ready for the project sponsor to submit to the member. Please don't forget to save your work as you make your way through the application and budget.
Now that we've gone over the e-form, let's go over how to submit the application. All applications and supporting documents must be submitted via the bank's secure portal, and only members can access the portal at this time. It is imperative that members request a workspace by 5 p.m. on May 25th so that the bank has enough time to set up the workspace and the member has enough time to upload the application before the deadline. We typically have a 2 to 3 day turnaround to grant access after a request. The sponsor will complete the AHEAD application package and route the documents to their member partner. As a reminder, incomplete applications will be deemed ineligible. All PII must be redacted from the application documents, including Social Security numbers, bank account numbers, and personal addresses, phone numbers, and emails. We cannot accept documents into the portal with PII, and we do not have capacity to redact this information for you. As a reminder, if PII is included, the application will be deemed ineligible. The workspace will contain 3 folders for each of the application documents. Members can learn more about uploading documents in our reference guide, How to Upload AHEAD Documents, which is available on our website. Now I'll hand it over to Abigail to take us through some important dates.
Thanks, Noelle, for that thorough review of the application. Here are the important dates for the 2023 AHEAD round. The application round is open and we are currently accepting secure portal setup requests. The form is available on our website and linked here for members to access. The deadline to request a workspace is Thursday, May 25th at 5 p.m. Portal requests must be emailed to AHEAD portal at FHLBSF.com. If this deadline is missed, you will not be able to submit an application the following week. The application deadline is Thursday, June 1st at 5 p.m. Application packages must be uploaded to the secure portal by the member. The secure portal is time-stamped, so documents should be uploaded before 5 p.m. We ask members and sponsors to address all questions about the application prior to this deadline. We don't provide feedback on applications during the round, but we can offer clarification and address technical issues. Before we jump into our first Q&A session, let's go over some frequently asked questions. Project location. The project location should be the main location where the project will be offered. If the project will be offered in multiple locations, please list only one location in this section of the application and explain the larger geographic footprint in the project summary location. We take project location into account when assessing geographic diversity, and we typically assign a project to a larger geographic region, such as the Phoenix metro area, based on the project location and additional information in the application. The start date can't be earlier than September 1st, 2023. Even though we announce the AHEAD awards in early September, the AHEAD grant can cover expenses as early as September 1st, even if the award isn't officially received until later in the fall. AHEAD is intended to be a disbursement program, not a reimbursement program, so we expect all project expenses to be no earlier than September. Peri-urban refers to a geographic location that exhibits both rural and urban characteristics, typically an area between town and country. A good example would be parts of Reno, which exhibit areas that quickly transition from urban to more rural. Sources and organizations. We ask for both financial sources of funds and non-financial sources of funds, as in other organizations that are going to be involved in the project. We only allow a few responses in this section of the application, but some sponsors have said more sources or organizations are involved. Please choose the organizations that are most involved in the project, the highest profile supporters, and any information that would be helpful for us to understand a full picture of the project. Overhead expenses. The program expenses should be for expenses specific to the project or program. An example would be curriculum and instructional supplies directly tied to a financial education program offered by the sponsor. Overhead expenses should be for general expenses shared across different projects or programs managed by the same sponsor. These are essentially indirect or administrative costs, including rent, utilities, office supplies, etc. There is no maximum on overhead expenses, but we typically see 10 to 15% of the total budget. I should note, we do not allow admin fees to the members. But if a nonprofit has a fiscal sponsor or is part of a larger national organization that provides services, we can allow that administrative expense. Now that we've gone over the application process, we will briefly review the final two pieces of AHEAD. Here's the program timeline we saw earlier. Assuming a project is selected for an AHEAD grant, it will move on to request funds, known as disbursement, implement the project, and spend the grant. As a reminder, the award announcement will happen in September. Awarded projects will move on to disbursement and implementation. They will have until March of 2025 to spend the grant funds. There are three key steps for the disbursement of AHEAD grants. First is the announcement, which takes place in September. The AHEAD award will be announced on the bank's website, and we will also send out an email to each member and sponsor of winning projects with detailed instructions on how to access the grant funds. In the second step, the member will need to submit a disbursement request to us, which includes 3 documents: a program agreement, a certification and disbursement request, and a disbursement budget. I will go over these more in a moment, but the important thing to note is that the disbursement package must be submitted to the bank so that the bank can disburse the funds by December 31st of 2023. Otherwise, the grant funds may be lost. We encourage members to submit the documents no later than November to ensure that there is enough time for disbursement. The sponsors should have access to the funds by the end of 2023, but could access the funds earlier if they work with the member to submit the disbursement request shortly after the September award announcement. When the request is complete, the bank will disburse the grant funds to the member. As Cindy mentioned earlier, we pass ahead grants through our members, so funds will go from us to the member and then on to the sponsor. Once the member receives the grant funds, they have 30 days to disperse the funds to the sponsor. We leave it up to the member and sponsor to work out the best way to disperse the funds after the bank has dispersed to the member. I have a couple of reminders here. All of the documents must be submitted via the bank's secure portal. This portal is different from the portal at application, so the member will need to submit the secure portal request form again. This workspace will also be used for compliance. Let's dive a little deeper into the 3 documents in the disbursement package. The first disbursement document is the program agreement. This is a 5-page document that is a contract between the bank, the member, and the sponsor. Because it is a contract, we recommend having your legal team review before signing. It must be signed by an authorized signer of the member institution and the project sponsor organization. The program agreement is currently available on the bank's website, so please review that document prior to submitting an application. In short, the parties are agreeing to spend funds according to the application and budget, fully expend the ahead funds within 18 months when compliance is due, and notify us of changes to the project timeline, project activities, and use of funds. We've noticed some winning projects from the last few years that aren't using all of the ahead grant during the grant period and are then seeking extensions. We are asking members and sponsors to be more aware of the 18-month grant period and to make sure the ahead funds will be spent during that time frame. Sponsors that show a pattern of not using the funds within 18 months of award will be noted when reviewing future applications. The CDR is a 1-page document which is only filled out by the member, in which the member certifies to the bank that all program requirements have been met. The CDR is also available on the bank's website, so feel free to review. The disbursement budget explains how ahead funds will be used based on the actual award and any other changes to the budget since the time of application. About 5 months will have passed between when you submit the application and when awards are announced, and we understand that some projects may experience minor changes to the budget in that time. However, if there are major changes to the project or budget between application and award, please let the bank know as soon as possible so we can discuss options. We won't go into detail about the disbursement budget today because we will provide more detailed instructions to projects that receive an award and can also provide direct technical assistance to members and sponsors on the disbursement process. Now that we've gone over the disbursement process, let's briefly review the final component of receiving an ahead grant: compliance. Here's the program timeline again. Projects selected for an ahead grant have a compliance responsibility to report how the funds were used and to keep track of project expenses. Compliance documents must be submitted no later than March 31st of 2025. A sponsor and member can submit compliance documents anytime during this 18-month period, so you don't have to wait until March of 2025 if the project ends earlier. In fact, we encourage submission of compliance documents as soon as the AHEAD funds have been fully spent. The compliance package must include the following documents: the AHEAD Project Status Report, AHEAD Compliance Budget Worksheet, and backup documentation. The bank has simplified our program compliance process to streamline and reduce the time and effort required of both members and sponsors to submit the documentation. Projects will be selected for an abbreviated compliance review. The bank will determine which eligible projects will receive abbreviated compliance based on a number of factors, including AHEAD application and the sponsor's history with the AHEAD program. There will also be a random component to meet a 20 to 30% threshold. Please note that even if a project is selected for abbreviated compliance and therefore only submits a project status report, we do reserve the right to request additional documentation. As with the rest of AHEAD, all documents must be submitted via the bank's secure portal, which will be the same as disbursement. It's important to note that if compliance documentation and/or other requirements aren't met, we could deem a project as non-compliant. Non-compliance could include the following matters: not spending the entire AHEAD grant within 18 months, not delivering a complete compliance package within 18 months, including a lack of backup documentation, and any major changes to the scope of the project or budget without the bank's approval. The first piece of compliance is a final project status report, which certifies that program requirements have been met and states the status of the project, including what was accomplished and what measurable impacts were achieved. This form is compared to the goals and objectives outlined in the original application. The PSR must be signed by an authorized signer of the member institution and sponsor organization. All projects must submit a project status report. The project status report is currently available on the bank's website, so we encourage all members and sponsors to review the report to better understand the bank's expectations and to help with putting together the application for this round. Those required to do full compliance will need to submit a budget. The compliance budget shows how AHEAD funds were actually used, along with any other changes to the budget since the time of disbursement. This is essentially the same as the disbursement budget. Those required to do full compliance will need to submit backup documentation. Regardless of your compliance level, it is important to track expenses throughout the grant period. The final piece of compliance is backup documentation, which tends to be one of the more confusing pieces of compliance. It also ties directly to the application. Backup documentation is required for the entire AHEAD grant amount, so each line item identified on the budget must have some type of backup documentation proving the AHEAD grant funds were used for that purpose. The sponsor should carefully consider which types of expenses would be best to fund with AHEAD due to this backup documentation requirement. Sponsors should also consider AHEAD funding for as few line items as possible. Sponsors should also consider AHEAD funding for as few line items as possible, since backup documentation will be required for every line item. This makes it easier for the sponsor to track these expenses. Here are a few examples of acceptable backup documentation for common AHEAD expenses. For salaries, wages, or benefits, a sponsor can use W-2s, pay stubs, or a detailed payroll report. For consultants or other professional services, we typically require paid invoices or copies of checks. For direct overhead expenses, we typically see a federal allocation report or a written explanation from the sponsor. Each project is a little different, so we encourage sponsors to reach out if they have questions about what documentation they should provide regarding their project.